This is a weeping wattle bush. It's got very, very soft leaves and can be used as bush toilet paper. Even though the leaves are very small, if you combine enough layers of them together, it becomes very soft, and you could compare it to a premium brand of toilet paper, not a cheap single ply, but that is only enough if you pile enough of them on top of one another. And usually there's not too many animals that will feed on these, and this one doesn't look to have been fed on very much, but an elephant may have broken this down in order to feed on one or two branches, or just to show its size and strength. Have any animals been located on safari this morning? Sorry, go again? Copy that, thanks very much. Do you mind if I join you there? Well, that was a stroke of fortune. Someone was actually close enough for me to actually be able to copy them, and they've got some animals not too far from us, where we've actually just been. So hold on, we need to get there. And here. What we will do is, once we have finished viewing these animals just ahead of us, we will continue following the tracks of that male leopard. Good morning, everyone. How's it going? How are you doing? So that was the guy that alerted us to the animals which were just up ahead of us. I got a brief glimpse of them moving away. And we should get another view of them shortly. The tricky thing about these animals is that they move very quickly through the bush. There we go. I'm told that there's 4 of these spotted hyena, and they all look fairly full-bellied. It looks like they may have had a successful night. And maybe it was them that chased the kudu onto the island. It looks quite muddy and wet, and I'm not sure what it would have been doing in the water so early this morning. Maybe quenching their thirst. They do quite often spend time in water. They're not averse to water like lions and leopards, and will even lie in water during the summer months when it's very hot. So they'll do that to keep cool. see if we can loop ahead of them and get you another quick view. I think we should have a little gap just ahead of us here that may get us closer to where we need to be. Not looking promising at this stage. I think they may have crossed through the riverbed to our left. Have you got them there, Brian?
Yeah, I saw them go that way across there.
Okay. I think those hyena, like I said, are full-bellied and have had a successful night out and are now going to be heading back to their den.
Yeah, one just slipped over the hill there.
Okay, well spotted, Brian. Brian just saw another one disappear, and sadly we cannot follow any further west of this position. We are on our western boundary, which is marked by this riverbed in front of us. Well, at least you did get a glimpse of the hyena. And it's not often that we get to see them unless they're at a kill or their den sites. So to bump into them randomly in the bush is usually short-lived. No different to the sites that we've looked at now. Taking a bit of a meal of this 20-point turn. There we go. Now, back towards the last tracks that we had of that male leopard. Those hyena that we've just seen could well have been the ones that were part of the sighting I spoke of a little bit earlier, where huge amounts of hyena. One guide said 18, the other said 30. So somewhere between 18 and 30 hyena chased off the Nkuhuma pride and Shimungwe pride of lion, all who were around the same kill, and proceeded to finish the whole buffalo that the Nkuhuma pride had actually killed. And this is the area that it happened in, further west of us. And hyena are highly, highly territorial animals. And there are even some reports that suggest they are so territorial that even when hunting prey, if they run into a neighboring clan's territory, often hyena will jam on brakes on this invisible line, which is to them their boundary. Really would love to get another view of the Anderson male, and at least a decent one for all of you. We've only seen him twice. The first sighting was probably better than the second, which is hard to believe because the second sighting, it wasn't the Anderson male alone. Him and Tingana, another male leopard, were having an argument over land, fighting for territory. And I was actually in this very area that we're going through now. to our left, about 50 meters away, was where we did see Tingana mainly and the Anderson male very briefly in the same sighting. They're a little bit far apart and not getting up to too much when we were there. But this was the area where the show went down. A lot of interesting movements of the leopards in the last few weeks and months, and one of those interesting movements have been that of Shadow, a female leopard who has been seen mating with Tingana and the Anderson male. And Ellen, one of our leopard IDing experts, has asked whether or not there are any further updates on Shadow and her last movements. As far as we're aware, Ellen, she mated with Tingana for 3 days, Anderson male for 1 day. Then I think we found her here the following day after she was seen mating with the Anderson male, and she was calling a lot. And since then we personally haven't seen her, but one of the guides from Elephant Plains said yesterday morning that he saw her following the Anderson male who was mating with another female, and some of the guides said it was possibly the Shimpalapala female, but that was not confirmed. And Ottawa is a property where I actually used to be able to drive around, and it's to the west and south of us, southwest of us. And that was the last update we've heard. So who knows where she could be now. Sadly, the radio network here is not very reliable, so it's difficult to be sure or not whether her tracks have or have not been found this morning. But we will be sure to keep you updated on any further updates on where she might be. Ideally, we would find her for all of you shortly, and that way we'll know exactly what's going on. This male leopard tracks appear to have veered off this road that he was heading down. We will continue in this general direction. Maybe he's veered off, maybe he's made a kill, or he's lying on a termite mound nearby. Now we've got a question through from Lynn in Michigan, and she's not asking about Shadow, the mother of Sandile, she's asking about Sandile himself. And she's mentioned that because Shadow doesn't very often hoist her kills into tree, has that been bad training for Sandile, or will he instinctively know to hoist kills into trees? Well, two things there. She does hoist kills into trees, just not very often, and not very often recently, and that could simply be because the kills have been too big. Having said that though, I've spent time with a female leopard called the Ravenscourt female, who is no longer alive, but I saw her and her cubs and various litters that she raised for many years when I was working in the Sabi Sands, where I first started guiding just south of here. and that's where I could traverse Ottawa and Ravenscourt and Sparta, 3 properties to the south and west of us. And she also was terrible at hoisting kills. She would some days, she wouldn't other days, even if it was a small kill. But all of her cubs would hoist kills thereafter, so I don't think we have anything to worry about there, and I think it just comes down to the individual, and I think you don't have to be concerned that Sindila has not had any training of hoisting. So, just to update you on Brent and his tracking escapades, he sadly has not had any luck, but we are going to send you across to him for a quick update as to exactly what he thinks going on over there, and we will see you again shortly.
Welcome back, everyone. Still checking this area for young Sindila. I walked through and climbed the trail. Again, I'm quite sure those tracks night drive light.
Welcome back, and I'm not sure how much of Brent's update you managed to get, but I'm sure he's going to keep trying his best to find young Sindila, as we are going to continue trying to find just about anything that offers itself to us at this stage. I don't think we can be too fussy this morning. It appears like not many of the guides have had much luck in locating anything. But it's still early and things could change, so don't go anywhere. I'm heading towards the construction site that is the Arathusa airstrip, so if you're interested in updates on how the new airstrip is coming along, that's something you can look forward to, but that's just about all that I can guarantee you at this stage. Now that the sun's beginning to rise up a little bit higher, feeling slightly warmer and enjoying it, the effect it's having on us. There's a thin layer of haze and clouds that's somewhat diluting the effect that it is having on us. Well, one thing that Brent has assumed is that because Shadow's been away for quite some time now, Sindile has taken it upon himself to kind of increase the area that he's been hanging around in, and that makes perfect sense. It will give him more prey options, and I'm guessing he also must be quite thirsty. I'm not sure when last he had a drink, but I think it was quite some time ago. Now, a lot of you will be happy to hear that I found tracks that I'm guessing are belonging to Shadow. I'm almost certain they're hers, judging by her size, and we are heading in the right direction to relocate with Sindile. We're still quite a way off, but those are some fairly fresh tracks of a female, and this is her territory. So let's hope that this is Shadow, and let's hope that we can find her just up ahead down the road. Surely not. Could they have already disappeared off this road? Or is she just walking in a strange part of it? Well, the tracks have already veered off the road, but I feel she may have maybe veered off ever so slightly to scent mark on one of the big marula trees that are prominent in this area. Well, when tracking, especially in our scenario where we can't leave the vehicle for too long, otherwise you guys will be left behind, it's best to just continue traveling in the general direction, and that way hopefully you'll find some further trap ahead. We are on our southern boundary of Arethusa here, so we cannot go any further right, and I'm hoping, if anything, she's headed further to the left, north into south, or to the right. There's nothing we can do about it. This goes to show how important it is to keep our eyes on the road. Those tracks we're only on daily, but rest to bear. Grim. Under every quarry bush. We've checked a little bit wider, we still haven't found. We had those fresh tracks sometime from during the night. We're just going to go back into that area and see if we can have a look to where Liam and James left him last night. Maybe he's moved his way back there. I've walked through this whole area to the south of us, and I saw Steenbok and Korans and Zebra and Impala, but no Sindile. So maybe he's down this side, or possibly he might have crossed out of our area. Hopefully not, but we will keep checking. We're just going to keep quiet here for a few minutes.
Maybe we might hear a squirrel alarm calling or Franklin exploding at the charge of young Sindile. Oh, we've got a little steenbokkie. He's wandering out into the road. So I'm sure quite a few of you are wondering when Sindile might drink or how much he needs to drink. Specifically Miss Jin and Kathy. And he doesn't actually need to drink. Leopards are not water dependent animals. They will take advantage of water when it is available. On a sunrise safari a few mornings ago when we were with Sindile, we watched him licking the dew off some of the grass and trees, so he can get moisture from that. But an animal like a leopard will, if it doesn't have easy availability to water, will actually get its moisture from the animals they kill. So they will get their water content from the blood of the other animals. So leopard is not a water dependent animal. Saying that, they will definitely drink when it is available. The area where he has been left, there is no water really close by. The closest water is the treehouse waterhole. So maybe that's a plan. Maybe we should go have a look in that area. What do you think, Vim?
Yes.
So we're going to move out here. The tracks were heading east and the waterhole is east, quite far east, but maybe he has decided now to leave this little spot and move off to have a drink. So let's go have a look around the treehouse waterhole. Sorry about that, guys. It really seems that the gremlins are playing havoc with us this morning, and we've just been chatting about water holes. And Mealy from California, who's new to asking questions, welcome, is wondering whether most of the animals have moved out of this area to look for larger water holes. Mealy, I don't think so. I think we've actually had an influx of animals into this area. We've got a lot more sort of zebra and waterbuck that have moved in here because there are some permanent water holes on the property, and we're definitely seeing a lot more elephants as well because of the water holes. And so we've actually had an influx of animals. If I had to say, during the summer months, animals will move in and out. There's pans, which are little depressions that are filled by rain that have always have water in them. At the moment now, there are only a very few areas that have permanent water. So if anything, we've had an influx of animals, and we're going to head to one of those water holes right now. It is drying really quickly, but there is water in there, so there will be animals utilizing it as a drinking spot. And what we're hoping is that young male leopard we're looking for has moved towards that water hole. No tracks coming out here. But the last tracks I did have that I assumed to be the most fresh were heading east, and that is towards the direction of the treehouse waterhole. So I'm just going to be listening to the radio for a second. Hey guys, just a quick update on the Inkahumas. and the Nkuhumas have crossed straight north into the Manyuleti. We've got a bit of a spider web there, and so they've crossed straight north into the Manyuleti, and that could be because the Birminghams have headed into Buffalo's Hook. They were right up on the sort of northeastern boundary of the Manyuleti. And there we go, that's hyena tracks in the road, not the leopard we're looking for. Now, we've been chatting quite a bit about water, and we just chatted about the fact that leopards are not water dependent, and the same goes for lions. So Edward was wondering, is there any noticeable physical differences between a lion that drinks water regularly and one that doesn't, and the same for a leopard? Edward, not at all. They do, as I said, if there is water available, all lions will drink. So even those desert lions, if they do have access to water, they will drink it. Otherwise, they'll just get their water from the prey they kill. Sorry, just heard a. I think it was just a testicular making some noise. So false alarm. I assume, like the buffalo bulls, once they're pushed out of the breeding herds, do they form bachelor groups like the buffalo bulls? Very long way away, but I can hear lions. Very far. Well off our property. Sorry about that, Kay. I got quite excited hoping they were a bit closer. They sound like they're opposite Buffalo's Hook Dam, but in Buffalo's Hook itself. So quite a long way away. I just heard that faint. Well, didn't get that loud, so it was very faint. But okay, they don't. The wildebeest do not form bachelor groups. Pretty much once they're pushed out of their territories, they run around nomadically on the edge of other males' territories till they get snacked on by something. Young males, though, will sometimes form small bachelor groups of 2 or 3 while they're still trying to establish themselves. But generally not. They don't band together like those old buffalo bulls. Lots of impala around us. And zebra off in the distance. Now, we chatted. Now we've got some zebra. It's not the best sighting of zebra as they go through there, but I've got a really nice traditional African folklore about zebra. We'll just have a quick look before we continue on. You can see how those stripes do work as camouflage. Here we go. And so it's said that when the Creator was handing out all the different horns and hooves and coats, all the animals were actually sort of a very dull grey, plain looking, and the Creator decided to bestow on them a whole various set of different horns and hooves. And this probably is due to the fact that the zebra always looks like he's very well fed and he's very round due to their digestive system and being hindgut fermenters. The zebra again sort of and carried on walking, and eventually zebra was the last to arrive at the cave. and the only thing left was this black and white stripy coat. All the other animals thought it looked a bit ridiculous, so they had no real interest in it. And the zebra didn't really mind, popped on the coat and walked out, and all the other animals carried on laughing at Zebra. Zebra didn't really care, sort of, and carried on eating the nice green grass. And that's why, if they say to this day zebra, you will almost always find them with their heads down, munch, 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 always looking very well fed. The zebra has always been more interested in eating than what he looks like. So we've got no tracks coming out yet. This is where Sindile's last tracks were heading, but quite far from here. Not to say he hasn't moved through the block to the south of us, but we will definitely go have a look around the waterhole. So we chatted about bulk grazers and selective grazers, like a zebra being a bulk grazer and a wildebeest a very selective grazer, and how grass heights can impact animals and their nutrition and basically lifespans and that. And Djuma, from another sunny part of the world in Fresno, California, said, well, he was on safari in Kenya a few years ago. They came across a buffalo that was said to have died of starvation because the grass around it was incorrect, and he'd like to know if this is possible. Jim, it's very possible, and depending where in Kenya would make the big difference. So whether it was a French reserve or whatnot, or if it was out in the Mara, it is possible. It is unlikely in that area, unless the buffalo was very, very old and wasn't able to move into a better grazing area. But I mean, you can take a domestic cow or a buffalo and you put it in a paddock with grass that looks wonderful and it's all this high and whatnot, and that animal will die in a matter of weeks. Most of your long and tall grass has already climaxed, so it's already seeded or whatnot, and most of it is dead. And it will only start really growing properly from the growth points, depending on where you are, whether it's grazed. And buffalo being a bulk grazer, it seems to be a little bit suspicious to me. Buffalo will eat even much longer grass than the selective grazers. It would have to be a really, really bad year and very strange circumstances for that to happen. But the buffalo will bulk graze, so it'll eat even some of that dead stuff and get some nutritional value from it. And that's why big herds of buffalo have to move so much at this time of year. But it is possible, but just very unlikely. The other thing that sort of spurns grass's growth points, and this to a lot of people would seem counterintuitive, but it's fire. The majority of the sort of grasslands and savannas of southern and East Africa, and to a greater extent northwest Africa, the Sahel and those areas, are what you call fire climax biomes. And what that means is that a lot of plant species and a lot of grass species actually need fire. So basically what happens is that the fire will remove the moribund, the dead grass, the sort of no nutritional value, the dead cellulose, and people spurn on growth points, and a lot of people think fire might kill grass, but it doesn't. Almost all grass, their growth points are actually below the surface of the ground. And what else a fire does is it burns off a lot of the little bushes and stuff and trees that might be stopping the grass getting enough sun, as well as adding carbon back into the ground and creating a bit of a fertilizer. So fire is very important, and it has been used as a tool in Africa since man first managed to master the use of fire. And the East African savannas and open grasslands are a really, really good point of this. The Maasai have been using fire for years and years and years to affect grazing. So basically, if you burn just before the end of the dry season, now this depends. It's not a fixed rule, and you need to take into account how dry it is, if we're going to have a good rainy season and stuff like that. Obviously, in the olden days when there were no fences and not that many people, most of the fires were caused by lightning, and they could burn an area 3 times the size of the whole Sabi Sands. The animals would just move out of that. Obviously, the animals now do not have that choice, so that's why there's controlled burning. But the Maasai, to this day, still burn, and not only, but mostly for their cattle. They'll burn an area, and then the rain will come, and then that nice lush green grass, which is very good for animals and full of nutrients, will come up, and they'll graze their cattle on it. And wild animals in the Masai Mara and the Serengeti will also take advantage of that. And speaking of the glutton, there's some gluttons that look like they've already come and had a drink here at the Treehouse Waterhole. Unfortunately, no leopard tracks or tracks of young Sindile coming down here yet. And one of the most amazing things, if you look at a lot of places in Africa where there have been a relatively long standing human habitation, so before colonial times, man-controlled fire has made a lot of parts of Africa what they are today. And if you take the Central African rainforests, specifically in the Congo and Gabon along the coastal plain, you have these very strange open grasslands right back from the sand dunes. And strangely enough, those were all man-made, cleared and burned and cleared and burned and cleared and burned, and now that they are open grasslands right on the edge of one of the most impenetrable rainforests in the world. And these were made by people who disappeared. And we find a lot of artifacts and sign of people there, but these people disappeared, they reckon probably 20,000 years ago, maybe even a little bit earlier. So very, very interesting. And there was sort of a gap where these people disappeared, and then later, much later, sort of a couple of thousand years gap before the next people moved into this area, and they were called basically the King of Congo, which is quite a funny thing because he didn't even live in Congo. He lived in what is today northern Angola, and that kingdom was a very narrow kingdom, but it ran the whole coastal belt of Central Africa, from northern Angola, from around where the Cabinda enclave is in Angola now, where Angola produces most of its oil, all the way through nearly to the Cameroon border. So an incredibly long coastline, but very narrow. And eventually it got too big, so the most northern sort of chieftains or generals, or what would you call them, provincial managers, decided, well, the king's so far away, we're going to make ourselves kings. And that's how different kingdoms on that Central African and West African coast developed, like the Luongo kingdom, which ran from middle of Congo all the way through just to the Cameroon border. Again, because of the impenetrable rainforest that was behind them, these kingdoms were very, very narrow and were only sort of 20 kilometers from the beach inland. And one of their main businesses was slaving, strangely enough. So they would go inland and raid other people who lived inland and take those people out and then sell them through to European slavers coming through, or to Arab slavers. And also ivory and to a lesser extent gold and rubber were all harvested in that belt and then sold through to Europeans and Arabs, traders that were coming through that area. The most fascinating thing is because that rainforest takes over so quickly, and you can see where there was an open area that's disappeared, and that can disappear in a couple of hundred years if it isn't burnt and kept open by people. That a lot of the artifacts and stuff from that area sort of just disappear into that morass, that thick, jungly, viney, whatnot, and they're not found. So there's quite a few gaps about what happened with people in that area, as there are in southern Africa, for a slightly different reason. So we are blessed with lots and lots of archaeological sites in southern Africa, and some of the more interesting ones are all along the coast. And with the sea levels where they are currently, the most important archaeological sites are probably most of them 30 to 40 meters under the water. So at a stage the sea levels in Pretoria to have looked at, and that was in an old termite mound. And the termite mounds and the aardvark holes were not only being utilized by animals like porcupines, hyenas, wild dogs, they were utilized by sort of a Stone Age and early Iron Age man in Africa as kilns, as an oven. So they would blast and make fires in those old aardvark holes to create pottery and stuff like that. And generally the pottery you find around those old kilns is the pottery that didn't work, so lots of different pieces. And the older the pottery, the more basic the pottery, so no decorations and whatnot. And as sort of man became slightly more developed in this area and more sedimentary, so with a base and growing crops and that rather than more nomadic, you will notice that art sort of takes place, and suddenly there's delicate little drawings and patterns and such things worked onto the pottery. So it's very, very interesting to watch the sort of progression of man in this area. And further north, there's sort of I don't know what you would call it. We call them sort of we just normally name them after a petrol station, but it's sort of a petrol station on the highways that has petrol and a fast food joint and bathrooms and a break. Now these existed 2,000 years ago here, but very, very differently. Specifically on a main trading route well north of us here, between what would have been sort of, I don't know if any of you know about Great Zimbabwe and Mapungubwe, were two walled cities in Africa, and they've been trading with Arabs for many thousands of years. There's a very famous golden rhino that comes from Mapungubwe. But on these trading routes, although they had gold and other such things in these areas, they lacked probably one of the most important thing to Iron Age man, and that is iron. So people would travel long distances to visit ironsmiths and to buy iron or collect iron ore. And along these major trading routes, you had these sort of one-stop motel, petrol station, food, and on that, basically, they were always on Inselbergs. For those of you not sure what Inselbergs are, they are sort of mountains that just pop up. They're individual. They stand alone from another mountain range. And quite often they have a sandstone section where there'll be an undercut and cliffs and stuff like that. And there's an amazing one that I've been lucky enough to visit, probably about 300 kilometers north of here on private land, so it's very difficult to get permission to go there. But basically it's this undercut cave, and it's sort of the precursor to the modern day motel or road stop. And there are pots, literally my height, so 6 foot, 7 foot in height, these pots that would have held maize and other whatnot. There was sleeping areas, and it would have worked as a stopover, so people would have run it as a business. And you find things like cowrie shells 600 kilometers inland, which was an old form of currency here in Africa, as well as beads that would have been traded with the Arab nations that were trading all the way down the coast of Mozambique. And you do find sort of things that are not supposed to be here, and I know, so it's a very, very interesting thing. And we can chat about this literally for the whole drive, and we can go through the history, even to the modern history, which James knows quite a bit better than me, about the Shangans and the Zulus. And basically, if I remember correctly, James might have to double check. I'll double check with James when we get back. But the Shangan people, or the Tsonga people, used to live further south towards an area called Cozy Bay. There are still some Tsonga tribes there. But at the beginning of the Zulu sort of kingdom, they were pushed north, And the Shangans basically get the name from Shishangan, which was one of their chiefs. And basically Shishangan is a place. I actually used to live inside the Kruger when I worked at the Kruger, and it means to put the children down. So that's where they stopped running from the Zulu nation and settled in this area. So fascinating history, and I mean we can go all the way from sort of 2.4 million years ago and Sterkfontein all the way up into very recent history. And there's still been quite a lot of turmoil in recent history with the advent of the Europeans arriving. But enough of that, let's get back to the animals. It looks like the gluttons are coming down for a drink. Since we're sitting at the waterhole and waiting for the zebras to come down and have a drink, and we have been discussing the fact that certain predators are not water dependent, Gary would like to know what other animals in this area are not water dependent. Well, those of you who are watching the sunrise safari this morning, we've actually seen another one of the non-water dependent animals, and that is a steenbok. So a steenbok is not water dependent. Strangely enough, on the thing of predators, hyena are water dependent. So that's quite interesting. Spotted hyena are water dependent. Brown hyena are not. Let me just think a little bit. One must remember that all the non-water dependent animals will drink water when it is available. But you'll find a lot of your small carnivores, genets, civets, are not water dependent and are often found in very, very arid areas of Africa. Most carnivores are able to get enough moisture from what they eat. So hyena is almost an exception to the rule in that case. So it always amazes me at how careful animals are approaching the waterhole. Always have a look around, take their time before they approach the waterhole. Now we were chatting a little bit earlier. I was asked what was the biggest group or dazzle of zebra I'd ever seen. And I said probably 400 to 500 zebra drinking at once on the Boteti River in northern Botswana. And even that mass of animals sort of stops and does this as they approach the water till one drinks, and then it's literally this wave of zebras that pop into the water. The zebras are about to drink, and the first one is right there. And see, as soon as one drinks, the others move in a little bit quicker. Guys, try to get some screenshots of that. There's an absolutely lovely reflection. While these zebras quench their thirst, Scott's got something a little bit strange, so we're going to cross across to him quickly, but we will stay here in case the zebras keep drinking for a while.
Well, welcome back everyone, and look at these two waterbuck bulls gently nuzzling one another. It could actually be the initial parts of them sizing one another up, and it could break out into a fight. There's 5 waterbuck bulls here, but we're going to keep focused on these two who currently have their horns locked. Initially when we came across them, they were all minding one another's business, and then these two slowly, very gently started nuzzling one another's heads. But a lot of the time the antelope will actually be quite gentle, and visual displays of dominance will often be enough to prevent them getting into a full-blown fight. Or that could have merely just been friendship that we witnessed. We have found more tracks of, in all likelihood, Shadow, this female leopard. She probably walked directly where these waterbuck are walking now, but in the opposite direction, still heading north and east in the general direction of where she left her cub Sindile. So maybe they have reunited. But we're going to send you back to Brent with the zebra and continue tracking down this female leopard, hopefully with some luck.
So we're back with the zebras. He actually just got a bit of a fright, not sure what, and with all their heads down drinking, they suddenly jumped up and leapt. And it pays to be a bit cautious when at a water hole with your head down in case there is a lion stalking you. Hey guys, I'm just going to take my jacket off. It's warmed up very quickly in the last few minutes. You can see how they're constantly lifting their heads just to make sure there's no possible danger around. And when the one on the far right pops its head down again, so here we go. I'm just going to, those of you wondering what that noise is, it's just me getting a few snaps. There you go, if we get tight in there view, and it's quite a nice screenshot before he lifts his head. If you, oh there we go, but oh it disappeared. But with that one zebra eye between the other twos, there we go, I can show you what I was talking about. It's just quite an interesting shot. There we go. Put that cable in. You can see, I do love the patterns of zebra. They are such a great photographic subject. But the zebras have finished their drink, and we are going to maneuver on, see what else we can find. So obviously the name Treehouse Dam can be quite disconcerting. And Charlie and Anne-Marie are wondering, was there actually ever a tree house here? And is anyone planning on putting up another one? I know there is one. I'm going to have a quick look in these trees. Liam, have you seen it before? Yeah, it's that marula there. The plank. So there definitely was, but there is no plan to build another one at the moment. We'll show you where it was now. I know Scott has showed it to you guys before. I can see the planks from here, or what was left of the treehouse. You probably find it just slowly disintegrated from the elements. So the VM's going to show you in that marula tree. And for us out here, I think it'd be very different from what you would call a tree house back home. It probably would have just been a flat deck rather than an actual house, so it would have been open to the elements. It just would have been some planks and a small deck up in the tree. So I think one of the interesting things that's going to happen today, and I think you guys might have been picking up on it, is that now it's dry and it's warm, the animal behavior is changing slightly, and specifically with the elephants. And you'll notice we haven't been seeing too many elephants on the sunrise safaris, but we have been finding them regularly on the sunset safaris. So you probably found they've spread out quite far from the water to feed during the evening, and as it gets warm, sort of from 10-11 o'clock, they start making their way towards the water holes, and they'll drink and then again move. So guys, let me just look very strange there for a second. No, false alarm. So the elephants are going to be utilizing the water more during the heat of the day. Not all the elephants, but quite a few of the breeding herds. And that's because they are traveling distance to feed and then coming back during the heat of the day to quench their thirsts. We've got you might notice generally quite a lot of the people you see out in the bush are of a certain age. Miss Souza from California has just noticed that other than Mark, all the guides and rangers seem to be quite young. Is there a reason for this? Is this something people do at a certain age? And what do they generally do later in their careers? Well, Masuda, you are correct to a degree, and a lot of the guides that are working at the commercial properties or living in the bush can be quite young, and there is a general tendency that after a certain while, certain things become a little bit more important than being out in the bushes, and it generally, when you find guides leaving the bush, it is, if it's a lady guide, it's generally a man. If it's a male guide, it's generally a girlfriend who will encourage them to probably find a little bit more stable employment. Well, not stable, but a sort of 9 to 5, not working weeks on end and then off for weeks, for 2 weeks at a time. And so generally there happens to be a sort of a younger generation guiding in the lodges on a permanent basis. After that, there's quite a few different avenues. Quite a lot of the ex-guides I know have stayed within the sort of tourism industry, but they've moved into sales and marketing or something like that, sort of at a head office base in Johannesburg, and will do sales trips and things like that. I tried it very briefly, it wasn't for me. I don't think I'm ever going to leave the bush. Then the other avenue, what happens with guides who've been guiding for quite a long time, and strange enough also to that, we go into private guiding. So what private guiding is you're not based at any particular lodge. You will have guests who request to have you personally on safari, and quite often it could be guests who've taken on safari somewhere else before. And for example, one of my trips I did, was it last year? Before Gabon or after Gabon, I can't really remember. It was with guests that have been on safari with me 4 times previously at different lodges, and we did an epic trip. We did a 2-week trip, and we started in Cape Town and we ended in Kenya, and visiting different various lodges and places along the way. Obviously, private guiding is quite a lot more, from a tourist point of view, quite a lot more expensive to have a private guide. You do have a very different experience where, as a private guide, he's with you for your whole trip. If anything goes wrong, your bags go missing, anything is there to sort it out, and he'll have breakfast, lunch and dinner with you, and we'll spend that whole time with you. And depending on the area, you will have a guide from a lodge, but you will also have a private guide, so it makes quite a difference. And the once people start private guiding, they've generally got a lot of experience and been and worked in different countries, so are able to guide people through different countries and even into places they haven't been, because they sort of have a good understanding of what's around. And the most important thing about being a guide, strangely enough, which a lot of people don't realize, is most guides will have a good basic understanding of the bush and whatnot, but a guide's main job is actually an entertainer. So you have to keep people happy, you have to think about what people want before they even know they want it, and you develop some strange skills, and eavesdropping is a very important one. So you can be sitting here on your game drive, and you can have 6 people behind you, and you're talking about Impala, but you're also listening to say, oh, I would like a certain beverage when I get home tonight, and you try sort of predict people's wants and not, entertaining and telling stories, and that's a lot of guiding. Obviously you have to have the good bush knowledge, but the majority of guiding is entertaining. And then I know a lot of guides who've gone the complete opposite way and now work in commercial finance or property or banking or stuff I have very little knowledge about. But it just depends on the individual. And you will get the guides and people who will never leave the bush. And it just depends on what people want, and people want different things at different times of their lives. So as a few of you would have noticed now, we have started earlier in the morning, and Nancy from Minneapolis is wondering, well, if it starts half an hour earlier, is it going to end half an hour earlier? It is, Nancy, and the reason for that is we are trying to operate in the time where the animals are most mobile and you're most likely to have the best sightings. So at this time of the year, by 9:30 it's very hot and there's very little activity, so we will be ending at 9, so it will end half an hour earlier. But then in the afternoon on the sunset safari, it's gonna start half an hour later, but also end half an hour later. So what we're doing there is we're putting ourselves into what I call the magic hour and spending more time in the magic hour. And we will be having a little section that is going to be after the sunset, and we'll be using the spotlights, and that does excuse me, give us the opportunity to see some of the more interesting nocturnal mammals like white-tailed mongoose and civets and genets and bush babies. So very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to experiencing and showing you guys a bit of nocturnal life here on Djuma and Arethusa. Change in seasons, and we are going to start getting a slightly different set of characters making their way onto our set here at Safari Live. And Amanda from Alabama is wondering whether snakes are going to start making a play as it gets warmer. Definitely, Amanda, we have seen some more snake tracks on the roads recently, and Steph and I, when we were driving back to the Manuletti the other night, we did see a snake across the road in front of us. And Amanda's referring to the fact that we saw that dead honey badger with James, and whether it could have been killed by a snake, and whether that was because of the seasons changing. Well, speaking of that dead honey badger, I think we maybe should go have another look. As that skin falls off, we might be able to see a little bit more of what might have happened. And I think we'll definitely go check on that honey badger that has retired on the sunset safari. A little bit far to get there now. So as it gets warmer, the waterhole is always a great place to be. So I'm going to pop down towards the Djuma waterhole and see if anything's there. So as we head down towards the Djuma waterhole, we're going to cross back to Scotty and see what he's been up to and if he's got any updates for you.
Welcome back, everyone, and we continue to track that female leopard. In all likelihood, Shadow, her tracks crossed over the Arethusa airstrip, heading still east, and we have given up on those tracks because it's a very thick block, and if she continues east, she's going to cross into this property on our right behind me called Hoffman's, where we cannot go. But the good news is that her general direction of movement is certainly back in the direction of Sandile, and it is only my guess that it is her tracks, but I'm fairly confident that by the size of her tracks and the area that they're moving in, it is in all likelihood her. Now, we did drive down the Triple M road, which is a boundary between Arethusa and Hoffman's, and we found some male leopard tracks that had dragged a kill across the road, but they dragged it into a property where we cannot go. And I did see some footprints of a tracker there, so they have in all likelihood searched for that animal and not found it, or if they did, not close to the road, otherwise we would have seen vehicles there. So what may have happened is that the hyena tracks that I saw in the area may have meant that the hyena stole that leopard's kill, but it did look like the footprints of a male. So those are the updates that I've got for you, and we're going to continue now and check our southern boundary, and if this leopard had have carried in this general direction through the land on our right where we cannot go, she could have very shortly popped onto Wheelteller where we can go. So we're going to continue north and then head straight east and hopefully bisect her tracks. If she has indeed crossed into our property, she may still be somewhere between the last tracks on the airstrip and where we're going now. It's about 3/4 of a mile to a mile from the last tracks to where we're going to continue searching. On the topic of leopards, we've got another question through from Marianne in Boston, and she's interested to know on any updates on Mvula and his territory. Has he actually been kicked out completely by Tingana? And yes, Marianne, I think it is fair to say that Tingana has successfully acquired a large portion of what used to be Mvula's territory, and that's up towards our eastern boundary of Djuma, between Djuma and Torchwood. But we haven't seen Tingana as far as that eastern boundary, which is a road called Cheetah Cutline. So I think we will still see Mvula from time to time, and I think he does still own some of the land on Djuma. It's not all belonging to Tingana now, but it will be interesting to see what happens. What you will tend to find, Marianne, is they often not very strict rules, and there will often be an overlap or a buffer zone where male leopards may lurk in one another's territories, kind of no man's land, you could say, on the periphery of their territories. But he does seem to be spending Mvula at least more time further to the east of Djuma, as well as further to the north of Djuma. Territories don't necessarily also have to be these perfect round or square blobs, which is often as humans how we would assume them to be, but they can sometimes be a long thin corridor, for example, or very mismatched in shape. And I think that's what's going on with Karula at the moment. She's been spending a lot of time north of us on Buffelshoek, but quite far west in Buffelshoek, but in the same breath been seen quite far east of us in Torchwood. And I think it's a long, thin territory that she's now acquired between Shadow and Nkanyeni, and who knows, possibly some other leopards as well. But both Karula and Mvula, who used to be the two dominant males and females on Djuma, are now seen less and less often here. But thankfully their gap has been filled by other leopards. In this case it's been Tingana and Shadow. And it won't be the first time that a young leopardess ousts her mother from a territory. It kind of makes sense, because a young daughter will be stronger and healthier than her aging mother, and therefore be able to acquire her territory within time. Sadly, no sign of Shadow's tracks crossing this road into Djuma, but it may have happened just up ahead. I'm going to be sure to come out on tracking team this afternoon in search of anything to help James and Brent show you guys a good time. So it'll be those two out this afternoon, and just a reminder again that we will be heading out half an hour later this afternoon. So this morning we are half an hour early, and this afternoon we will be half an hour later. And thanks so much for joining in the sunrise safari action this morning. It's probably been the first drive where we haven't found you a big cat for quite some time, and it's quite nice though to be able to take time to view the other animals when the cats aren't around. So we're going to send you across to Brent quickly. Thanks for following. He's got some alarm calls that he would like you to join in the hunt. Thanks Brian, thanks Nikki and Tara in the final control. Enjoy and good luck.
Welcome back, guys. Just as we're coming to the end of the show, Liam and I heard a kudu alarm calling somewhere to the south of the Djuma Dam. We're just going to switch off and listen here. I would have guessed for it to be around here somewhere. It's just two very distinct kudu barks. Bo! Bo! Which is a really good sign for the sunset safari at least. So guys, we're coming towards the end of the sunrise safari, and it has been quite a quiet one in terms of the predators, but we have seen an amazing general game. I mean, not often we get to see 3 or 4 species in one spot like we did right at the beginning of the sunrise safari. We're still listening here, and it was also wonderful to get to chat a little bit about the hominoid history in the area. And definitely we'll come back to that at some point in the coming days. It is a very nice different aspect that sometimes we forget that we are also part of this ecosystem and have been for a very long time. Even though we have sort of possibly evolved beyond it, we had to have come from it. So it has shaped us in what we are and who we are. So thanks very much for all your questions, and we really do appreciate them. We're going to keep looking around here for a little bit, VM and I, see if we can find whatever those kudu were alarming for, and hopefully they'll still be there for the sunset safari. So guys, have a wonderful day or morning wherever you are in the world, and remember that we're going to be starting half an hour later on the sunset safari. So goodbye from the wildebeest and myself.